Hey, what's up, Superdads? So I'm here to answer a question that showed up in the Facebook group. There's actually a series of questions, of which this is one of them. So there will be more videos answering these questions. Today's question is about how to lower your A1c. And of all the questions that were posed in this thread, this is the one that's the most straightforward to answer. So I'm gonna address it first. First, we need to know what our A1c is. Basically, it's just an average of your blood sugar levels over the preceding 2 to 3 months. Why is it important? Well, your blood sugar levels, if they're consistently elevated or you're experiencing regular spikes in them, it can be an indication that you're headed down the road of type 2 diabetes. And we don't want to go down that road. Elevated blood sugar is not a great thing, especially chronically elevated blood sugar. So, why would your blood sugar be elevated if you're not aware? I'm going to use a metaphor to describe it here because I think that makes it a little bit simpler. It's not a perfect metaphor. No metaphors are perfect, but bear with me. Okay, so we're going to imagine our body a bit like a car. And in the car, your muscles, I want you to think of them as the storage tank for fuel. So it's where you put the gas. That's like your muscles, because when the car moves, it's using fuel, especially when you jam on the gas, it's using fuel from the fuel tank to make the car go. And when you run out of that fuel, the car stops moving. So if you were to exhaust all of the glycogen stores in your muscles, and we'll get on to how this factors in with fat and stuff a little bit later in the metaphor, but yes, if you were to use up all of the fuel in your muscles, then you wouldn't be able to use them anymore. Now, this is extraordinarily hard to do, and the fuel will replenish, but that's where the fat cells come in. Now, what are the fat cells in your body? This is a bit weird. I want you to imagine that not only is your body a car, but it's a car that is located in the context of a post-apocalyptic world. So maybe there was a zombie apocalypse or something, nuclear holocaust or something like that. But in order to have enough fuel, when you find a fueling station that is still operating, you don't just fill up the car, you also have a bunch of balloons, and you fill those up with gas as well. Not suggesting you do this, please don't do this, but you fill up these balloons with gas and you keep them in the car. Really a terrible idea. Or you hang them on the car. That might even be more appropriate, because as you add more balloons that are filled up with more gas, the car gets more voluminous, just like we would if we're gaining fat. Now, the issue is most of us have a limited number of these balloons. So you don't necessarily regularly add more fat cells. Can you? Of course you can. You absolutely can. However, it's much more common that your fat cells fill up like a balloon. So when you're looking fluffier, when you're a bit fatter, that's your fat cells being expanded and filled up, right? Rather than you adding a whole bunch of them necessarily. Over time, you do add more, but by and large, it's them getting larger or smaller. So then again, when you lose fat, you're not actually losing fat. What you're doing is draining the balloons of their fuel. And why would you do that? Well, if you use your muscles, that being the fuel tank of the car, you use the fuel in the car, and you need more fuel. Well, that's where you take one of those balloons and you squirt some of that fuel into the tank, and then you've got some more fuel. So your fat stores provide fuel for your muscles when there's not as much of a pressing need. They're a slower fuel source. So if you're going for a walk or something like that, you're going to be using the balloon fuel. Whereas if you are, trying to accelerate 0 to 100 as fast as possible to escape from the zombie horde, then that would be the fuel tank of your muscles. Okay, so different systems, different fueling systems. Okay, so this analogy is going kind of off the rails, but that's what it is. So then, what is blood sugar? Blood sugar is essentially, just sugars, right, are going to be energy. That's the actual fuel that's going into the tank, whether it's in the form of glycogen in your muscles or whether it's stored in your fat cells in your balloons. Insulin is an important factor here. And insulin is like the hose that you use to put the fuel into either the tank or into the balloons, right? So you stick that hose, whether it's a gas pump or whatever it is, you stick it into the fuel tank and you fill it up. Okay, so insulin is what gets the energy, the fuel, into either the muscles or the fat cells. Now, why would you have an elevated blood sugar? It's because for most people, like there are 1,000 different reasons, but for a lot of people who are dealing with lifestyle related type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes or whatever it is, it's because you've developed some sort of insulin resistance. And why would you have resistance? Well, imagine that your fuel tank, your muscles, is already full, and you stick that hose in and you try to put more fuel in, put more gas in. What's going to happen? Well, the fuel tank is going to resist it in the sense that it's already full. You can't put any more in, and so it's going to the fuel is going to splash back out, and it's going to get all over the car, and that's your blood sugar, right? It splashes back out and goes back into your circulation in your blood because the muscles are already full. Okay, so then maybe it tries to go into the fat. But imagine those balloons are already so expanded that they really can't take anymore, right? Now, we're going to imagine that these are really sturdy balloons. They're not going to pop or anything. But if you try to put too much gas in them, more than they'll fit, they'll shoot it back out. And so what's happening here is because your fat cells are already full, because your muscles are still full of fuel as well, you are developing insulin resistance. They are resisting the drive of insulin to put more energy into those places. And as a result, it's spilling back out into your blood. And over time, this resistance gets worse and worse because your body goes, oh, geez, like we really need to get this in there. Make more insulin. And by making more insulin or taking insulin as a medical treatment, then you are basically increasing the pressure with which that hose is functioning. So it's shooting this stuff even in harder. And maybe that works for a little while, but it also leads over time to more and more insulin resistance, right? So what do we do about this? How do we deal with this? Well, this metaphor should make clear two easy options. One would be use the fuel in the tank. So use your muscles to do work. And the best time to do this, really, when it comes to resistance training, you should be doing it regularly, 100%, and you should be doing it to a high level of fatigue. You should be doing it with high levels of intensity so that you know that you're exhausting the fuel reserves inside your fuel tanks, inside your muscles. Another great way to do it is to actually do some sort of light exercise after you eat. So like go for a walk, right? Or do some isometrics after you eat. If it's raining outside, for example, right? Because what that's going to do is it's going to, you eat a bunch. So now you have a lot of blood sugar. Your blood sugar is elevated because of the energy you put into your body. So if you then do something with your muscles that depletes the energy stores that they have, or, go for a walk and it starts using energy from fat or something like that, right? You are now making room for that blood sugar to be put in to those storage places via insulin, okay? You're making room for it. So that is a really crucial thing. Resistance training regularly, consistently, just as a matter of course, and then doing something after you eat in order to help create space if there isn't already space there. Another one would be lowering your exposure to simple carbs eaten on their own, right? So a lot is made of high glycemic index foods. They spike your blood sugar a whole lot more. That's really only true if you're eating them kind of on their own. Like if you, ate a bunch of sugar or something like that, it would absolutely spike your blood sugar like crazy. Okay, fruit can do this because it's so high in like if you eat like a clementine or a mikan or whatever you want to call it, really sweet little oranges. It could spike your blood sugar up like crazy. But most times when we eat even high GI foods, we're eating them with something else. So very few of us just eat white rice or just eat white bread or something like this. Usually we have something with it that is a lower GI and like, a protein source or something like that. And that will help balance things out. So at the very least, don't be eating a whole lot of simple carbs on their own. Okay, when you do sit down for a meal, you want to start with protein, because by starting with your protein, you are allowing that will raise your blood sugar levels, but it won't spike them up like crazy and cause your body to go nuts in response and jack up a bunch of insulin that then, tries to force all this fuel into your muscles that results in resistance to that insulin. We want more of a gradual slope up, and one way to do that is start with protein, because it's so much lower GI that it's going to allow your body more time to sort of get into the insulin response. Okay, eat more protein just in general, because this will have the byproduct, the side effect of reducing the amount of carbs that you eat, because you're going to be more satiated, but it's also going to help you build more muscle. And the larger your fuel tanks are, and this is where we're going to get to with the next one, is the larger your fuel tanks, the larger your muscles are, the more space you have for that blood sugar to go in, and so it's much less likely that you're going to develop any sort of insulin resistance. So just eating protein on its own will increase muscle mass for most people. Okay? Build muscle. Focus on building muscle. Focus on building muscle. I can't say this enough, right? Your training, your exercise routine should not be focused on burning calories. That is a waste of your time. Focus your exercise time, because we all have limited time on this earth. Focus it on building muscle so that you're investing in success down the road for the long term, right? I like to use the analogy of like savings accounts and these sorts of things. If you are burning calories, right, you're essentially saving pennies. You're saving pennies, right? It's like walking around outside. Your saving strategy is like, I'm going to walk around outside and look for money on the ground, right? That's your strategy for savings. Whereas if you are focusing on building muscle, you're putting it in a trust fund or something like, not a trust fund, but mutual fund, something like that, right? Where you're going to get interest later on, and it's going to pay off more and more and more as you continue to invest. Okay, and then finally is lower your body fat. Lower your body fat. And as we talked about before, that doesn't actually mean get rid of fat. It means get rid of the stuff that's stuck inside your fat cells so that they can shrink back down to a more normal size. And how do we do this? Well, use more energy than you consume. I mean, it's like a real simple formula. It's not simple. There are a lot of things that are happening under the hood there. It's like more of a black box sort of situation. But if you're gaining weight, it means that you're consuming more energy than you are, expelling, employing, than you're using. So really, if that's the case, then use more by becoming more active, not necessarily doing more cardio per se, but taking the stairs more often, standing up more often, not as sedentary, play a sport, make sure you're getting your resistance training, these sorts of things, or eat less, especially less calorie dense processed foods, these sorts of things, okay? More whole foods. It's very hard to get fat eating only whole foods. There you go, okay? So that's the formula. That's really what it is. I mean, of course, there are other things you can do, and of course, there are many more reasons for why someone would have an elevated A1c. But for a large portion of people, it really comes down to these things. So I hope that something about this was helpful to you. I really appreciate the attention. Take it easy. Go be super.